A historic victory in a special election for an Iowa Senate seat in the Metro. It's been vacant since Democratic Senator Claire Celsi died a couple months ago. Democrat Renee Hardman handily defeated Republican challenger Lucas Lofton to represent parts of Clive, Windsor Heights, and West Des Moines. Local 5's Emma Strunner shares more on what this means for the state Senate moving forward.
A packed house at the tavern Tuesday evening of Iowans eagerly awaiting to hear the election results, only to find out at 8 p.m. that Renee Hardman would be filling the seat for Iowa Senate District 6.
Pay close attention to Iowa, because a political story almost nobody predicted is developing fast. What we may be witnessing is one of the decade's most significant party collapses, and it is unfolding in real time. Iowa is not a closely divided state where either side can suddenly break through. It is solid Republican territory. Trump won it by 13 points, the GOP controls the governorship and both houses of the legislature, and Republicans occupy the state's entire congressional delegation. Yet, across the past year and a half, that political wall has begun to fracture. Race after race and seat after seat, Democratic gains have shaken assumptions and left operatives on both sides scrambling for answers.
Shortly after polls closed, unofficial results came in, and Renee Hardman beat Lucas Lofton in the race to fill the Iowa Senate District 16 seat.
Our community made their voices heard tonight.
This blocks Iowa Republicans from regaining a supermajority lost in August, a factor Hardman says was key in winning the race.
We just decided as a collective that we're going to get this job done, and we are going to prevent the supermajority. And that is what helped drive our motivation to get this job done.
A series of overlooked special elections that once seemed politically insignificant has turned into a much larger threat to Republican control heading into November. And the most alarming reality for the GOP is that this story is far from finished. Iowa matters because its political history tells us more than a normal state result ever could. This is the state that gave Barack Obama his first major breakthrough, then moved decisively toward Donald Trump, before becoming even more Republican in the 2024 election. That is exactly why the current movement is impossible to dismiss.
I can't speak for all Democrats, but I can speak for myself. And truly, I think that reaching people where they are is what will make the difference. I wanted to prioritize online communication. Folks get their information in different ways now. And so, again, reaching people where they are via social media. We prioritize Spanish language communication. We had, get out the vote messaging in Spanish. The full website was available in Spanish. That was really important.
Iowa was carefully built into a Republican fortress, almost a case study in how the GOP could permanently dominate a traditional Midwestern agricultural state. Republicans occupy nearly every statewide position and have maintained complete control of the legislature for years. On paper, this should be among the safest territory the party has anywhere in America. That is why unexpected losses here carry consequences far beyond one district or one state house race. When supposedly untouchable Republican seats begin falling, Washington pays attention because it suggests the political foundation itself may be shifting. The first warning arrived in January 2025 when Democrats won a vacant state Senate seat in an area that had voted decisively for Trump just a few months before.
Heard frustration overwhelmingly. People in my area are concerned about their Social Security benefits. They're concerned about what happens even if they're not utilizing Medicaid. What happens when Medicaid is defunded to our rural and semi-rural hospitals like the ones in my area? We have the only major medical center for 90 miles in any direction, and when those funds go away, that affects everyone in the community, whether or not they're utilizing, government programs for health.
Initially, the loss was easy to dismiss as a one-time anomaly. Special elections often produce strange results, participation can be extremely low, and district-level circumstances sometimes favor the unexpected candidate. Republicans moved on quickly, and the national press barely noticed. Inside Iowa, however, political observers understood that something unusual had happened. A Democrat had captured a seat in territory that had backed Trump only months earlier, and that simply was not supposed to happen in such reliably red ground. It was the opening warning, although nobody could yet see how large the pattern would become. By August, the explanation of just a fluke was becoming much harder to defend, Another state Senate seat opened in the district around Sioux City, deep inside northwestern Iowa's Republican stronghold, following the death of its GOP senator.
Just decided as a collective that we're going to get this job done and we are going to prevent the supermajority. And that is what helped drive our motivation to get this job done.
A West Des Moines City Councilwoman and a Lutheran Services Iowa CEO, Hardman now makes history.
It has led me to this historic moment as the first African American woman elected to the Iowa Senate.
She feels the seat left vacant by Claire Celsi, who passed away in October.
Let's be clear. This was not some toss-up district where either party had a realistic path to victory. It was deep Republican territory, the kind of seat GOP leaders assumed they could defend almost automatically. Yet Democrat Catelyn Dray did not merely sneak across the finish line. She won by a comfortable margin and secured an outright majority against the Republican nominee. That one result immediately changed the balance of power in Des Moines. By taking the seat, Dray ended the Republican supermajority in the Iowa Senate and knocked the party below the two-thirds mark it needed to advance gubernatorial appointments without Democratic cooperation. The GOP response came quickly, and it sounded more defensive than confident. Party officials tried to dismiss the defeat as an artificial outcome created by national Democrats, pouring money, organizers, and volunteers into one small district. They portrayed it as an expensive, isolated victory. But Republicans still lost a race that, by every traditional measure, should have belonged to them.
Okay, tell us what it's been like on the doors. I know you've been out talking with a lot of voters.
I have. We have been out knocking on doors between myself and plenty of volunteers and supporters, and they're excited. They're excited that a candidate is out there that is going to be able to speak truth to power, someone who has lived her life in service for everything that she's done, and they are excited about what we're fighting for, and that's to strengthen public education, affordability for all, a voice for all, and being able to work across the aisles, which I have been able to do as a sitting city council person for almost 8 years.
Republicans had an answer ready for every defeat. One district had unusual turnout. Another race attracted too much Democratic money. A third result came down to local circumstances that supposedly had nothing to do with the broader political mood. Viewed separately, each explanation sounded reasonable. But politics does not happen in isolated boxes, and by the time Iowa Democrats had captured a second Republican-held seat, those individual excuses were beginning to collapse under the weight of the larger pattern. This was Iowa, not a traditional battleground where both parties regularly exchanged seats. Republicans had spent years turning the state into one of their most dependable strongholds, yet Democratic candidates were suddenly winning in areas that had supported Donald Trump and pushing the GOP into close contests where victory should have been automatic. National Democrats called the results a warning to the entire Republican Party, and for once, that message was based on more than hopeful rhetoric. The evidence continued accumulating. In March, Democrats nearly captured a southeastern Iowa House district that Republicans considered safe. They did not complete the upset, but the fact that the race became competitive was significant. A seat designed to be an easy Republican hold suddenly required serious attention. 1 month later, Democrats flipped another Iowa House seat. What Republicans had dismissed as a single strange election was now becoming a repeated sequence. A surprise win, a near upset, another actual flip, and then the loss that destroyed their Senate supermajority. The political ground beneath the GOP was moving, even if Iowa had not yet changed parties. And then 2 announcements transformed the entire 2026 map. Governor Kim Reynolds revealed that she would not seek another term. Republicans had expected her to remain the dominant figure in state politics, so her decision created uncertainty inside a party accustomed to governing without serious competition. Soon afterward, Senator Joni Ernst confirmed that she would not pursue a third term. In a matter of months, Iowa went from having 2 powerful Republican incumbents to preparing for open contests for both governor and the United States Senate. That is an extraordinary development in any state. In Iowa, it was especially destabilizing because it happened while Republicans were already absorbing losses at the legislative level. The party was not simply replacing 2 candidates. It was being forced to defend the structure of its statewide dominance without the built-in advantages that incumbents provide. Ernst's final period in office had also become politically damaging. During a public town hall, a voter expressed fear that Medicaid reductions associated with Republican legislation could have deadly consequences. Ernst responded that everyone eventually dies. The remark was perceived as cold and immediately spread across social media. She later attempted to address the controversy with a video recorded in a cemetery, but the presentation appeared sarcastic rather than apologetic. Instead of ending the story, the video extended it. Democrats used the incident to reinforce one of their strongest arguments, that Republican leaders had become indifferent to the economic and healthcare anxieties facing ordinary Iowans. Concerns about Medicaid were particularly important in rural areas, where hospital systems can depend heavily on government funding. Ernst's remark allowed Democratic candidates to turn a complicated policy debate into a simple emotional question: did Republican officials understand or even care about what families were facing? Once Reynolds and Ernst were out, the Republican Party had to find nominees for two critical offices. The governor's primary quickly became crowded, with 5 Republicans competing over several months. No candidate established complete control until Trump endorsed Congressman Randy Feenstra. In the Senate contest, Congresswoman Ashley Hinson benefited from Trump's early support and emerged as the clear Republican frontrunner. Trump's intervention gave the party direction, but it also exposed its dependence on him. In a state supposedly dominated by a confident and organized Republican machine, the national party leader had to step in twice to resolve internal battles. While Republicans were still managing those contests, Democrats produced another result the GOP could not ignore. The death of Democratic Senator Claire Seeley created an opening in the Des Moines suburbs. Republicans believed the special election offered a path to reclaiming the 2/3 majority they had lost earlier in the year. Winning that seat would have restored their ability to exercise power in the Senate with minimal Democratic involvement. Instead, Renee Hardman won by more than 40 points. She did not merely protect a Democratic seat. She turned the election into a statement, becoming the first black woman elected to the Iowa Senate, while crushing Republican hopes of rebuilding their supermajority. It was another special election, another Democratic overperformance, and another moment when a Republican opportunity turned into a setback. By then, the cumulative story was difficult to avoid. Iowa had held 6 special elections during the year. Republican candidates had suffered damaging losses in districts where the party expected to dominate. Democrats had broken a supermajority, flipped legislative seats, and demonstrated the ability to mobilize voters in multiple regions. Republican officials continued to emphasize that they still held substantial majorities in both legislative chambers. That was true. The GOP remained the stronger party in Iowa. But political danger is not measured only by who controls the chamber today. It is also measured by movement, enthusiasm, and the direction in which competitive districts are traveling. The Republican defense centered on turnout. Special elections frequently attract only a small share of registered voters. Highly engaged activists can have an influence far beyond their actual size, particularly when one party receives national money and organizational support. According to this argument, Democratic success in a few tiny districts revealed very little about what would happen when the entire state voted in a general election. That is the strongest case Republicans can make, and it cannot simply be dismissed. A November electorate will be larger, less ideological, and more representative than the small groups participating in special elections. But there is a limit to how many times the same explanation remains convincing. One surprise can be random. A second can reflect local conditions. When the same party repeatedly exceeds expectations across 6 separate contests, analysts begin asking whether they are looking at a statistical accident or an emerging political signal. Special elections have value precisely because they measure intensity. They reveal which side is willing to organize, volunteer, donate, and vote when there is no presidential campaign dominating television every day. In Iowa, Democrats repeatedly displayed that intensity throughout 2025. When the June 2026 primaries arrived, the organizational contrast between the parties became clear. Republicans had spent months fighting through a 5-candidate gubernatorial contest before Trump's preferred nominee prevailed. Democrats already had State Auditor Rob Sand ready for the general election. As Iowa's only Democratic statewide office holder, Sand faced no primary challenge and avoided wasting resources on an internal battle. The Senate races produced a more complicated picture. Ashley Hinson easily secured the Republican nomination, demonstrating that Trump-backed candidates still commanded enormous support among the GOP base. On the Democratic side, Josh Turek emerged from a difficult primary with a tested organization, labor support, and increased visibility. Democrats still faced history. The party had not won an Iowa Senate race since 2008. Winning statewide would require persuading voters far beyond the Democratic base. But the absence of an incumbent, combined with the special election trend, gave Democrats an opening that had not existed for years. The broader map made Iowa even more important. For the first time in almost 60 years, voters would choose a new governor and a new senator in the same cycle. Republican-held congressional districts previously considered safe were being reassessed as competitive. Vice President J.D. Vance traveled to the state to campaign, indicating that national Republicans were not treating Iowa as guaranteed territory. Democrats, meanwhile, increasingly described the state as a realistic opportunity. Their message focused on healthcare, Medicaid, public services, and the claim that voters were rejecting an extreme national Republican agenda. Whether that message can survive a full general election remains uncertain, but it clearly helped Democratic candidates in the preceding races. The entire 8-month timeline now tells one connected story. A Trump district flipped in January, a near upset followed in March, a House seat changed parties in April. Republicans lost their Senate supermajority in August. 2 major incumbents stepped aside, and Democrats ended the year with a 4-0 point victory. Every event can be explained individually. Together, they resemble a political pendulum beginning to move. Republicans may still hold Iowa in November. Trump remains popular with the party base, and general election turnout could restore the GOP's traditional advantage. But if Democrats capture the governorship, Senate seat, or multiple congressional districts, Iowa will become evidence that even seemingly secure red states can shift rapidly. The result is not predetermined. The warning, however, is already impossible to deny.